Good evening, everybody. We are going to get started in just a couple of minutes, but in the meantime, if you guys are interested in some of the food for tonight's evening, you can head over that direction. We'll get started shortly.
Screen lights up. It's good to go.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Those of you that are over by the food, keep doing your thing, and we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the 19th Annual Palouse Basin Water Summit. My name is Kara Haley, and I have the honor of being your MC this evening and leading you through our wonderful events. Quick little tidbit about myself, just so you know kind of where I'm coming from. I work for the City of Pullman Public Works Department in the current role of city engineer. I've been there for almost 7 years, did consulting before that for about 8 years. I did get my undergraduate at the University of Idaho in civil engineering and also have a master's in engineering from Colorado State University with an emphasis in water resources. And I'm currently the chair of the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee and a local of the area for 30 plus years. So just really happy to be here with you all and kind of share and be involved with a lot of the events this evening. So I am going to go through a few housekeeping items. We've already gotten started a little bit, but to start, thanks go out to our Pullman High School students, Georgia Meyer and Evan French, who have been helping us with registration this evening. Hopefully, all of you stopped at the registration desk on your way in and you got a ticket for a low-flow raffle. A low-flow toilet raffle ticket. And that's being provided courtesy of Moscow Pullman Building Supply. We will raffle that off at the end of the night, so make sure that you're here for that, and you might just be our lucky winner. You'll also get 2 drink tickets back there, so make sure you register if you haven't already and circle back. Restrooms are out the door to the right. You'll take one more right, and you should be able to find those facilities there, and feel free to sneak out and find those whenever you need. Special thanks go out to our sponsors. They are listed on the back of the program, so make sure to take some time to flip that over and check out who's helped make this event possible tonight. We do have the food and drinks, and those are being provided tonight by Frank Marriott and Oak on Main and Pullman. There were some exhibits out front when you walked in. We had a little extra time there, so hopefully you had a chance to take a peek at those. If not, circle back. And then also be aware we have a WasteWise station set up back here in the corner behind the food. Oh, actually right here in the middle, I'm sorry. And we can thank Kelly Cooper for that. She actually created this program as an AmeriCorps volunteer for the city of Moscow, and she's got it set up all fancy back there for you. But it basically allows us to have a zero waste event tonight. So it's set up for composting and recycling. So make sure to thank Kelly by putting stuff where it appropriately goes. And lastly, tonight's presentation will be recorded, not live, but we will post it on the Palouse Basin Water Summit webpage as soon as we can get that up. And with that, we're going to move on to our first event for the night. We are pleased to welcome two very important people to the podium to welcome us here tonight. And by the mere fact that they are here together now demonstrates the commitment they each have toward their communities and our region. Cooperation and collaboration are in their DNA. Please help me welcome Pullman Mayor Glenn Johnson and Moscow Mayor Art Betke.
I even see Bill Lambert here, the former mayor of Moscow. That shows the complete support. You know, even when you get out of office, you're still supporting the Water Summit because it is so important. And we are so great to be here. Art and I work together on a lot of different projects, especially the airport, and we're making a lot of progress on that. I was showing a picture the other day to a friend of mine because I have a picture of the terminal down below. You don't see it when you're driving by, but the groundwork and the foundation part, they're working on that by the hour. It seems like they're making a lot of progress on that. But we're here tonight to support the Water Summit. First of all, thank you, John, and thank you, Paul, for all your work in organizing this. Pullman has been a long partner for a long time on the PBAC group. And we've done a lot of different projects over the years. Since 2008, we've offered the toilet rebate program. Well, that's a very popular program. We have a picture of an apartment complex with just tons of toilets right in the middle because they were taking advantage of the rebate. Because we know it saves water. Matter of fact, our engineers have calculated we've saved 30 million gallons of water with the toilet rebate program and our yard coupon project. So those are important projects we're doing for the entire area. And we have other things we're doing too. We also right now are working on our advanced metering program. Some of the things are getting put together right now, and we're hoping to have that installed incrementally, probably starting next year. And this way we can at least tell people what kind of water they're using, how often they're using it, if there's a leak, and you can see it right on your phone. So these are different things that we're trying. But again, working together because it's so important for this entire region. Art?
Thanks, Glenn. Following you is always an intimidating task. You've had more experience than have I. But welcome to the Water Summit, the 19th Water Summit. And we're all here for some education and networking for issues surrounding water. For a goodly count of years, we've all taken for granted the fact that we turn on a faucet and water comes out. And that went on for regionally many decades until people started noticing the aquifer is declining. It's going down, down, down. And well, how far down can it go before there isn't any more water became the question. So taking notice, the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee was formed, the Water Summit took root, and we began to discuss these issues very seriously. And soon enough, and we'll hear more about this later, I'm sure, from the PBAC people, there are solutions coming down the route, and we'll be making some choices on those and see where that goes. But it turns out the water is more than just about our regional, provincial concerns and attitudes. It's more global than that. It's very global, and everything we do is actually infinitely connected with what people do and what water does. I was in the Peace Corps in Niger in the south end of the Sahara Desert for 2 years, and I got used to living on 10 liters of water a day for everything. And here we've got seemingly an infinite supply, but it's really not so infinite. We behave pretty poorly relative to water and how we treat our environment, and here's a chance for us to kind of make up for it and to look to the future and mitigate our impact on the environment in which we live. So I think we owe our organizers, Paul Kimmel and John Kimberling, a big thank you for all the work that they've done on this event. And moreover, thanks to everybody who cared enough to show up and get educated and learn more about the global issues surrounding water and our regional dependence on water. So I encourage everybody here to listen, to learn, and then work together to alleviate things. So go forth and enjoy. Secondly, never, ever, ever give a microphone to a politician because we are loath to surrender the thing.
That might be your case.
Yeah. So, but tonight we have a special event. We're pleased to recognize a worthy individual with the 2022 Palouse Basin Water Advocate Award. Nicole Baker worked for the past 15 years for the City of Moscow, most recently as our Water Conservation Sustainability Coordinator. Nicole was the driving force behind the highly successful and helpful Wisescape guidebook. Additionally, she was the primary author of the city's water conservation plan. As one of the founding board members of the Palouse Basin Summit, I think a few others would acknowledge that no one is as worthy as Nicole to receive this award. So Nicole, pop on up. Congratulations. There it is.
Thank you.
All yours. Say a few words, please.
I will. Wow. I have to say I'm very honored for this award. I really appreciate it. But our community deserves this award as much as I do. Working for the City of Moscow, there's such a, and of course the City of Pullman and our collaborative efforts, everybody is so progressive and thinking forward, and my job was only supported by all of the support staff, our community. The success of the programs is because of our community. So honestly, the reason I shine is because everybody that supported me and our community. So thank you very much. I appreciate this very much.
Congratulations. You're welcome.
Again, congratulations, and I might mention that you can see that Art's relaxed because Consul was last night. For Pullman, Consul is tonight. And I don't know if a 2-drink minimum is enough, but for that, have a great meeting. Thank you.
All right. So you guys don't know this yet, but we're trying something new. First thing I'll tell you is turn your phones off, silence them, but also get them out, if you would. And we are trying some new live interactive polling tonight, so I need you all to get your phones out. I know it's a big ask, but I need you to go to slido.com. So you can also scan the code, the QR code at the top there. And when you get there, I'm going to give you all time. You need to enter, there says enter code up in green, and you need to type in Water Summit, no spaces, all one word. And I'm going to look around and see how people are doing and wait for some confirmation from folks that they're getting there. Oh, I see 1 thumbs up. I see 2. I see 3. Whoo! Maybe we'll get halfway through that. I still see some phones trying to reach that, so I'm going to wait. Oh, yes, if you are interested in wireless, there are some placards on each of the tables that tell you the network and the password, which would be another step at this point. But if you're wanting Wi-Fi, that is the way to do it. Okay. I still see some people down looking. When you do get in, you should see up at the top it says Palouse Basin Water Summit poll in blue. And there's options for Q&A, and there's options for polls. We're going to start with polling, but know throughout the night if you have any questions, you can go ahead and toggle between those, and you can type in your question, and we'll, assuming we have time for question and answer, we may be able to get to some of those. So if you don't want to forget your question, type those in, and we'll hopefully get to answering some of those. How are we doing? Are people prepared? Are they ready for the first poll? Thumbs up. Okay, we're going to move on. Okay, so the first groups of questions, we're just going to get to know who's here with us tonight a little bit. I promise it'll get more comprehensive later. What is your age group? So if you have your phone open, it should be asking you that question. I see 23 people, 35 people have answered. And we definitely have a larger majority here in the 36 to 50-year age range. But I see some younger folks jumping in there. I know we have at least 2 high schoolers here somewhere because they did our registration, so I'm going to pretend there's a couple in that category. Okay. We're going to move on to our next question. Where do you reside? So this one you're going to actually enter in a location. We're talking about Pullman, Moscow, maybe Latah County, Whitman County, something specific along those lines. And the way that this works is it's going to, looks like Moscow might be winning a little bit, but Pullman's coming back. And we have some Spokane Valley, I like that, Colfax. We have some of the smaller communities, Quincy, Genesee. We have some county representatives. I don't see Latah County yet. There they are, yay. I'll give it another minute, but this is interesting. I thank Saline for setting all these up. Our next question is, how long have you lived here? Or I guess where you live would be, it seemed like I didn't see any too far away from here. And we have a lot who have been here for 31 years or more, which is awesome. That's a good sign that it's a good place to be. We have some 0 to 4 years. I like that too. That means we're drawing new people in as well. What is the highest degree of level of education you have completed? Like I said, I promise, we just want to get to know you guys a little bit better. And you guys are really quick. I can hardly keep up with you. Okay, a lot of us have bachelor's degrees and graduate degrees, and we have some doctorates as well, and I can't actually scroll down to the trade school, unfortunately, and I can't do math that fast, but is it 0? Is that what it's showing on your poll? All right. Well, that's something we have to push for some more, I think. So I think we could benefit from some members from there here too. Where do you receive updates regarding water in our community? This one asks you to rank from number 1 being the most used to number 6 being the least used or maybe not used at all. And there we go. So it looks like our cities are doing okay, distributing some information, the newspapers, websites and social media. I only see 33 people, so I'm going to let this one simmer for a second. And I know Salene's going to be taking notes, so we're going to see what we can do from this information. Okay, so city information, websites, social media, and the newspaper. Okay, are you here representing an agency or as a community member? And I like this one because I know we're always trying to get good engagement from our community members as well as, folks that are typically, okay, cool, 44% community member. I really like that. Quite a few representing a local government agency, regional business. I like that as well. State agency. And let's see, Rusty, what's under university? 8 under university. So we have a good range of folks here. Is this your first time attending the Palouse Basin Water Summit? And I'm wondering how many people will be able to check that I've been here all 19 years. I'm looking over at that table. I don't know. Well, yes, we were virtual. If you chimed into it at any point, how about that? It doesn't have to be on the night of, but if you watched all 19 summits, I think that would be appropriate. Okay, 39%, it's my first water summit. That's a great category to be under, and hopefully you will come next year as well. 5 times or more, 26%. It's my 3rd summit, 13. We have a couple in the 2nd and 4th. What was our last category? I'm asking Rusty because he seems to. 6. 6 people. Can I have those 6 people raise their hand? Maybe? Wow. Okay. Kudos to you all. I love it. Okay. How did you hear about the summit? And wait. Okay. Other. Maybe it was word of mouth. Newspaper, social media, website. Okay, so we can use some of those other avenues a little more maybe, right? Okay. And then we're getting close to the end of this round of polling, I promise. What is our community's main source of water? I have a feeling I'm going to get a couple of folks that, let's see. Yay, woo, the sky. I knew we'd get a couple of those. Although it does fall from the sky before it gets into the groundwater, right? So creeks and rivers, the sink, the ocean. Yes, 97%. We get our water from the groundwater. And we'll be talking more about that later. And then, are you concerned about our water resources? And maybe your answer will change after tonight. Maybe it won't. Give that a second. Okay. And very concerned is definitely our top pick, somewhat concerned. So we do have a good audience who, we also want to get some of those that are less concerned, and maybe we'll change some of those around by the end of the night. And this is our last one. Do you know what the Palouse Basin, Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee is? There's a nice logo up on the screen. Yay, okay. 72% say yes, 23% say they've heard of it but don't know much, and some are 6%. So if we do our jobs correctly tonight, we'll all answer yes by the end of the night. And with that, I appreciate you guys all participating in that. And we're going to show a quick video. This was made by Gabrielle Lund, an environmental science student at WSU, and it's about the groundwater in the Palouse Basin. right. Well, that definitely had some very interesting facts to consider as we proceed through this evening. I have been told that that's going to be showing at the Cub before all of the movies, so that'll be a really neat way to kind of engage with our WSU students. So we are going to move on to the annual State of the Palouse Basin. And I'm going to introduce our speaker for this. So the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee, or PBAC, is a cooperative organization focused on ensuring a long-term quality water supply for the Palouse groundwater basin region. Our speaker, Saylene Accord, is the executive director for PBAC. She's new to the role, having just come back to the Palouse after 10 years in Boise, Idaho, where she was the planning and subdivisions manager at the city of Boise. Her background is in local land use, planning and development, with a bachelor's and master's degree in landscape architecture from the University of Idaho. We are so pleased to have Saylene and her family back on the Palouse. And here now to present the 2022 State of the Palouse Basin, please help me welcome Saylene.
Thanks, everyone. It's great to be up here and be back in the Palouse. So let's get started. I've heard tradition is a water joke at the beginning of every annual State of the Basin. This one's for you, Paul. So have you all heard of the one about the 3 holes in the ground filled with the water? No? Well. Yes. But hey, at least I got laughs. I don't know if Steve Robichon got that many laughs, so. Anyways, this is, speaking of wells, this was some pictures from 1890, 1933, when we actually had flowing artesian wells, meaning that the confined aquifer was flowing above ground. You can't say that for today's day, but back in 1967, PBAC was formed. It was the Pullman Moscow Water Resource Committee. It was made of City of Moscow, City of Pullman, University of Idaho, and Washington State University, because as Art spoiled my presentation. Thanks, Art. It should be a well-known fact that the aquifer was declining, the wells were starting to dry up, so those 4 entities got together and said, let's start thinking about alternative water supplies. Several decades later, we come to the groundwater management plan, again by that Pullman Moscow Water Resource Committee, and the mission is to ensure a long-term quality water supply for the Palouse Basin region. And there's several goals that this management plan has been laid out since 1992 and has been updated over the years, but implement a balanced, basin-wide water supply and use program by 2025. I better get on that. Action plan for aquifer system sustainability, understand the basin hydrology, entities, educate and facilitate entities in meeting their goals, educate the entities and the public on the state of the basin, so check for this year, and effectively working relationships across the state line. So PBAC today is made of the cities and the universities as well as the counties, and we have ex officio members for the state agencies. You probably know several of our members. We've got Commissioner Tom Handy, Mark Story, Councilmember Elaine McCall, Sean Coates, Kara Haley, thank you as our MC, Councilmember Gina Terusio, Tyler Palmer, Michael Parker, County Commissioner Tom Lamar, Paul Kimmel. You guys can read, I'll keep going. Not to say that those are not the most important, but we've got a lot of great folks on PBAC, and it's a very important goal that we're trying to work through. So our goals are to collaborate, monitor, analyze, research, and educate and implement. And you can find a lot of our resources on palousebasin.org. So one of the things that we do is monitor the aquifer. We've got 30 locations throughout the basin. They're not just PBAC wells, but they're the cities and university wells. They're also private wells or state monitoring wells. And you probably can't see the charts very well, but most of them are declining down, and we'll get into that more a little later. Forgot this slide, but we are declining down. So this is Wazoo 5 well, which is located near the airport, and you can see, the water levels from 2007 to 2020 on this slide. But the good thing is that we are slowing that decline. This shows from 1990 to 2000, and so, like the video said, we had over a foot of water being used per year, and now we're about 0.7 of a foot per year. So our conservation efforts are helping, but it's still in decline. And remember that artesian well at the top. If my PowerPoint skills and graphics were correct, that's where our water levels are today. And this chart actually shows from 1935 to 2020. So we are still in a state of decline. And our water usage varies throughout the year. We've got a baseline usage and non-baseline usage. So that baseline usage is separated with this red line. That's basically anything indoors that we use through the winter months. We're not watering anything outside. And then the non-baseline is everything between the months of roughly April through October, where we do water outside. So a lot of our water usage is for outdoor irrigation. And our pumping is influenced by the weather. So let's talk about how 2021 worked out for weather. I realize it's 2022, but we're not finished with 2022. So we don't have all the numbers yet, but we can give you a sneak preview of what's to come. But 2021, anybody remember how hot it was? So the red line is a 5-year average temperature, that's a 10-year average, 20-year average temperature. And you can see we definitely exceeded that last year. So pretty warm spring, summer, fall. And the next few charts, you're gonna see a lot of information. So I'll just sit here right now. This is a temperature comparison from the year 2020 on the left and 2021 on the right. And this is a comparison with a 5-year average from 2015 to 2019. So 2020, we had a little bit cooler temperatures compared to the 5-year average by about almost 3 degrees in May, almost 5 degrees in June, whereas 2021, we had a much hotter year. So you can see, 3 degrees, 7 degrees almost in June and July. So this is temperature. The next slide is the precipitation. So in 2020, we had a lot less water in April, a little bit more in May and June, whereas 2021, you can see a lot more red, so a lot drier spring. And then we also look at pan evaporation, which is how much the plants need for water. And again, 2020, pretty standard, maybe a little bit wetter, but 2021, the plants need a lot more water compared to that 5-year average. Now, the other thing we have to look at when comparing 2020 to 2021 is something happened in 2020. I have no idea what, but this little guy showed up. And none of us want to relive it. We all know what happened, right? But COVID came, we closed schools, businesses closed, classes moved online, state of emergencies were declared. So how does that affect our water usage and how we typically compare that water from year to year? So I'll just hit you with a big number real quick. In 2021, we used 2.43 billion gallons of water. You can see the breakout per entity, and Moscow and Pullman are always going to be our major pumper users just because even though there's a lot of water used at U of I and WSU's campus, not every student lives on campus, so conceivably they live in the city. And here's the breakdown percentage-wise. So Pullman had 41% of our usage, Moscow 33%, and so on and so forth. So how does this number compare to years previous? We have to go back maybe 2 years to 2019, where we used 2.35 billion gallons of water. But in 2020, we used 2.19 billion gallons of water. A lot of folks probably went home or fled the cities, maybe, to get away from COVID. And then again, 2021, 2.4 billion gallons. So we've got some fluctuation, at least how we'll compare that 5-year average even moving forward, because 2020 was definitely an anomaly. And while we did pump more water in 2021 compared to 2019, it was a much, much hotter year. So again, keep that COVID and the hotter year in mind as we move forward and looking at this water usage. So this is a change of water from 2021 to 2020, and you can see all of the entities were using a lot more water by 11.2%. This is our 5-year trailing average, so that's probably a little bit better comparison. From 2015 to 2019, we increased our water usage 3.5%. So still an increase, but certainly not an 11% increase. And then if we look at it from 1992, remember that was when the groundwater management plan was enacted, we've actually decreased our water usage by 11.4%. So I think we should just keep comparing ourselves to 1992. So you can see this chart again, but let's look at the numbers. We've got the baseline where we've used 502 millions of gallons of water. That's an average of about 125 million gallons per month. And then the non-baseline, those summer months, we used about 922 million gallons of water. And that's 28% of our water usage. So 2021 baseline water, the change from 2020, you can see Pullman and Palouse watered a little bit more, where UI, Moscow, and WSU watered a little bit less, or used indoor water, a little bit less. And then you can see the monthly change from 2020. So this is, I want to sit on this slide for a second. So January, February, March, we used a little bit less water indoors from 2020 to 2021. Whereas April, May, June, July, again, 2021 was very hot, so we used much more water compared to 2020. So how does this break down per capita? Again, 2.43 billion gallons of water. And you can see from 1992 to 2021, we started at 2.6 billion gallons per year, and we've dropped to 2.3. And this breaks it down by entity. So Moscow and Pullman, again, are always going to be our biggest water users, and then WSU and U of I, and then Palouse is in the purple. And for those of you who don't know, just because this might be your first water summit, U of I uses a little bit less water because most of the water that they use for campus is actually reclaimed water from the wastewater treatment plant. So if we look at Pullman's population and pumping percentage change from 1992, in 1992 the population was about 23,000 people, and Pullman was using 856 million gallons per year. That's increased to 32,000 people, and 2021, again, there's a spike. You can see it. Pullman was doing pretty good, and then 2021 is a hot year, and 997 million gallons per year. We'll look at Moscow, and their population was 18,000 people with 825 million gallons per year, and that's 1992. And now their populations are 25,000 people and using about 800 million gallons per year. So you can see overall populations have grown, but the water usage, while it has increased, it hasn't grown steadily or as high as the population. So we look per capita pumping, and we've actually done really good since 1992, with Pullman at negative 18%, or using 18% less than in 1992, and in Moscow 29%. So this is a chart that we always like to use at PBAC of when the groundwater management plan was enacted. The management plan said we shouldn't be using a 1% increase every year, and we have 125% ceiling. So you can see the red line is that 1% annual increase, and then the ceiling is in the green. And so other than 1994, we've done pretty good, and we've decreased that water usage. But we look at the same information, just charted a little differently. That's still a lot of water. So let's talk about that water. Just a brief overview. We've got two aquifers, the upper and the lower. Moscow typically only accesses the upper aquifer, but now Moscow municipality is accessing the lower aquifer, and then Pullman has access just to the lower aquifer. The two aren't completely connected, or not very well connected, and most of this water all comes from recharge from Moscow Mountain. And again, we look at the 30 different well sites that we monitor, and I'll just pull out two. So in the upper aquifer, this is the Moscow PD site. You can see that the levels were declining, but in the summer of 2017, Moscow stopped pumping from the upper aquifer, and now you can see that the recharge is happening in the upper aquifer, which is great to see. But that means the water's still coming from somewhere, and it's the lower aquifer. So this is a Washington Department of Ecology site, and you can see those water levels declining. So sneak preview for 2022, right? Because that's the year we're in. It was a much cooler year. So we look at these same charts that we did. 2021's on the left, 2022's on the right. Again, 2021 was a very hot year. You can see all the red bars. Whereas 2022 is a much cooler year with all those blue bars. 9 degrees cooler in May. We all remember that. And same with precipitation. So much drier year in 2021, but a much wetter year in 2022. And again, with the pan evaporation, the plants needed a lot more water in 2021, and they weren't doing too bad this year with all the water that we got. And we can't finish this chart up yet because it's only October, and we don't even have all the October numbers yet, but you can see we've used much less pumping in May, June, and July this year. And if you remember the chart from comparing 2020 to 2021, those were going up, and we used a ton of water. So sneak preview, we probably used a lot less water this year, but you'll have to come back for next year's summit to find out. So what's next? Obviously, conservation needs to continue, and that's why we're all gathered here tonight, is because we're concerned and want to know more about our water resource, and we need to increase that conservation. But conservation is not going to help us completely, and so we've talked about alternative water supplies. And with that, I'll transition to Robin's slides, and I'll come back. I'll let you introduce Robin. Sorry.
And yep, thank you, Celine. We will keep an eye out for questions, and if we have time, open it up after Dr. Robin Nimmer comes up to speak. But let me introduce her. Dr. Robin Nimmer is a senior hydrogeologist, project manager, and leader of the Water Resources Division at Alta Science and Engineering. Robin holds a BS in geology from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, an MS in hydrology from the University of Idaho, and a PhD in geology from the University of Idaho. She is a professional geologist in Idaho and a licensed geologist in Washington. She works on hydrogeology-related projects in the Northwest and specializes in flow and transport in fractured rock. Her projects range from characterizing and remediating groundwater contamination to helping individuals and communities have a sufficient water supply. Robin loves water, but is still a geologist at heart and is happy to stop at a good rock outcrop. Please help me welcome Dr. Robin Nimmer.
Hi, thanks, Kara. It's really wonderful to see everybody. She said I'm Robin Nimmer with Alta Science and Engineering, and I'm the project manager for this PBAC Water Supply Alternatives project. On our team was Jacobs and McCormick Water Strategies and SPF Water Engineering. So it's been really exciting for me a couple years ago to speak at the summit about what we were doing, and then last year it was what we were working on, and now this year it's the findings, so very exciting. All right, so tonight I'll be talking about just a little bit about the alternatives in the background, tell a story of how we got to where we are, and then a bit about the project overview, the tool we use for evaluating the different alternatives, and then a little bit about the supply, and then the findings. All right, so this is the timeline. Starting back in 1958, which is quite a long time ago, through 2013, different communities and entities looked at different water supply alternatives. Then in 2015, PBAC hired Anchor QEA and their team to evaluate all the alternatives. So they did that. They looked at a couple more, and they looked at 38 water supply alternatives. They brought everything up to the current dollars, and then they developed a supply target. So they looked at 50 years out using 1% annual growth, and also what would it take to stabilize the aquifer using their best professional judgment. And then they developed the top 4 alternatives. Over the next 3 years, they continued to develop data gaps and fill those data gaps. And then in 2020, PBAC hired Alta and our team to further refine those alternatives. So for our project, we developed interim steps. So over 50 years, we don't need 50 years worth of water right now, and we don't have that kind of money. So what could we do in phases to get to where we want to go? We also conducted outreach. Outreach is really important to PBAC. They want to bring the public along with them as we're looking at these different alternatives. So thank you all for being here. We also evaluated potential funding options. We investigated water rights for Washington and Idaho, looking to see if there were any red flags or any brick walls that we were going to run into. And then we also had discussions with the various state agencies, tribal, and then the state and national fisheries. Okay, assessment tool. So I can tell you that none of the alternatives is rising to the top. There is no golden egg. So we need to have an evaluation tool to be able to see which one do we want to move forward to the next level. And let's see. Okay, so we looked at a matrix. The previous consultant had developed a matrix to be able to evaluate the different alternatives. They looked at 8 criteria, and then in February, we had a workshop with PBAC to see if these same criteria were ones we wanted to move forward with. These criteria were weighted, and we wanted to see, do we want to use the same weights, or do we want to adjust them? Now that it's been a couple years, we've gotten some more information, some more feedback from people. So we added 2 different criteria, 2 additional criteria, and then we modified the weights. So this is a list of the different criteria, and they are in order of importance. So that first row, just as if you're reading a book, the first one is long-term supply reliability. That one has the highest weight. So long-term supply reliability is how reliable is the water supply during the years. For some of the alternatives, it would be just fine. Other alternatives, you might not be able to get the amount of supply that you're hoping for. And then also looking at what's the resiliency to climate change. The next one is unit cost of supply. So we looked at capital cost as well as operating and maintenance costs. And then public acceptability. That was another really important one that ranked high. The next 5 all had the same weight. So this one is property acquisition. So how hard is it going to be to acquire these properties? Is there a lot of property to acquire or not? The permitting complexity for water rights as well as environmental, and then looking at water quality. And there's actually 2 parts to this one. The first one is surface water. So are any of the alternatives downstream from a wastewater treatment plant or an industrial facility? And then the other part is groundwater quality. So would we be potentially impacting negatively groundwater quality? Then the other one is technical certainty of success. Some of these alternatives are just great engineering projects. Other ones are a little more tricky if you're doing aquifer recharge or passive aquifer recharge. And then the last one, which had a lower weight, is the extent of regional agreements required. And it's really important, and of course, if you're moving water across state lines, you're certainly going to need some kind of regional agreement. But it's not a barrier to move forward. All right, so now I'll get to dive into these alternatives. It's really fun. I've been talking about these alternatives for so many months and months and months, and we have a PBAC roadshow, and so anyway, this is just fun to share. All right, alternative 1 is diverting water from the Snake River. This would be diverting water near Wawawi and pipe to a regional treatment plant near Pullman, then pipe to Pullman. Then later that treatment plant could be further built out and a pipeline to Moscow. This would be for direct use and diverting water 10 months out of the year. This is estimated to provide 85% of the target. And you might think the Snake River is a pretty large river, why don't you just divert as much as you need? And that's very true. So with these alternatives, it's the first group that developed the alternative, and all those same things move forward other than the cost. So you probably could get 100%, it would just cost more. And there's also the potential to partner with the local utility on a pump storage project to help offset those costs. This is a chart, and I'm going to show you a chart for each one of the alternatives. On the x-axis is the supply in acre-feet per year, and on the y-axis is the capital cost. And it goes up to, I think, $120 million. Then there's a dashed line, and that's the supply target. So the first one that's shown is always the most cost effective. And you can see for this one, it costs about $90 million. I can't read this here, but I think it's about $90 million just to get water from the Snake River to the water treatment plant diverted to Pullman. And then the rest, it's not going to cost that much more to build out the treatment plant and to pipe it to Moscow. Alternative 2 has 2 components. The first one is diverting water in Moscow from either Paradise Creek or South Fork of the Palouse River. This would be for aquifer recharge, and it would divert water 4 months out of the year. The other diversion is from the North Fork of the Palouse River near Palouse, and that would divert water to a water treatment plant and a pipeline to Pullman. Later, that treatment plant could be built out and divert water to Moscow. And this would be for direct use and diverting water 8 months out of the year. And this is estimated to provide 82% of the target. So in this chart, you can see that it's about $20 million to get water to Paradise Creek. So you spend $20 million instead of $90 million just to get that first drop of water. And then the pipeline to Pullman, and then later you could build out to Moscow. Okay, alternative 3, you can notice here that the water in each state stays in each state. So the first one, we'll start in Pullman, is an intake diverting water from the South Fork of the Palouse River in Pullman to a regional treatment plant, and that would be for direct use, diverting 8 months out of the year. And then in Moscow, you would divert water from Flanagan Creek. There would be a storage and conveyance to a treatment plant near Moscow, and that would be for direct use, diverting water 12 months out of the year. And then this alternative as a whole is estimated to provide 100% of the target. And as you can see, the amount of supply is a lot greater with the Idaho side. So the first one is about $30 million to divert water from the South Fork and Pullman, and then the remainder to Flanagan Creek. You spend a lot, but you also get a lot of water. Alternative 4 has 5 components. We'll start in Pullman. The first one is diverting water from the South Fork of the Palouse River in Pullman. This would be for aquifer storage and recovery and diverting water 4 months out of the year. Then there would be wastewater reuse, diverting water 6 months out of the year. Over on the Idaho side, there would be diverting water from Paradise Creek for aquifer recharge, diverting 4 months out of the year, and then wastewater passive aquifer recharge for 12 months out of the year. And then there's also an additional conservation component of 15%. And this is estimated to provide 81% of the target. In the chart, conservation is definitely, as we've talked about it, it's the cheapest alternative. Cheapest, it's not even an alternative. We need to be doing conservation. Followed by wastewater passive recharge in Moscow and Paradise Creek, and then moving on to the Washington side with the South Fork, and then the wastewater reuse in Pullman. And you can see the wastewater reuse in Pullman, it costs a lot, and you get just a little bit, but that's just for the location of where the treatment plant is compared to where you would actually use the water up at WSU and in Pullman. Okay, so those are the 4 alternatives that the previous consultant had moved forward. And as we were working on this project, we took a little more of a deeper dive of what really makes sense. Can we move any of the interim steps into a new alternative? And also getting feedback from the public. Some people were concerned about aquifer recharge and aquifer storage and recovery. So for this one, we're using water from the South Fork of the Palouse River in Pullman for direct use. And then in Moscow, it would be diverting water from Paradise Creek, also for direct use, and then keeping that additional conservation component. And this is estimated to provide 80% of the target. Now, 2 things I want to mention with this one. These are for direct use. The benefit of aquifer storage and recovery or aquifer recharge is that you get to store that water in the aquifer. So right now, because we'd only be diverting that water during certain months of the year, we can't even use all that water. So it would take a couple years to be able to even use it all. The other thing is that these are dots on a map right now and lines for the pipeline. Those details will need to be developed as we get closer and as an alternative gets chosen. So some of the diversion locations are in a pretty good location, and I think they would stay. Other locations might change a little bit, and that could change the amount of water that we get as well as the cost. And again, just another chart starting with conservation and then moving up for the Pullman for direct use out of the South Fork, and then Paradise Creek direct use. All right, so people want to know, how much is this going to cost? And I've showed you the graphs, but I think this is a really good visual so that you can compare the different costs. So the graph on the left is capital cost, and you can see that alternative 4 has the highest cost, followed by the Snake River, alternative 1, and then alternative 2 is fairly similar with, well, that's next. I think I forgot 3. Anyway, you can see the chart. Alternative 5 has different colors because we're taking different components from the other alternatives. Then on the right is the 2021 annual operating cost. And you can see that the Snake River option is pretty expensive, $6 million a year just to operate, followed by alternative 3, that's the Flanagan Creek in South Fork. And then last by alternative 2, 4, and 5 is the least. Okay, and this is just a chart of all of those, and again, I know there's a lot of details here, but it's really just to let your eyes be able to compare the different alternatives. So I'm just going to pick 1 and 2. So how I mentioned, it's $90 million to get that first drop of water at the Snake River versus $20 million from alternative 2. So it's just a different tool to look at the same information. All right, so what are the findings? So we used the matrix that I talked about earlier, and we gave all the interim steps a score, and we ranked them. So the one that came out on top is alternative 5, and that's that diverting water in Pullman from the South Fork, diverting water from Paradise Creek in Moscow, and these would be for direct use, and the additional conservation component. The next ranked alternative is alternative 3, and that was that Flanagan Creek alternative. So with that, I'm going to bring Saline back up.
Thanks, Robin. So PBEC had a workshop this summer, and the committee came together, talked through all these alternatives, and are now recommending alternative 5. So the reasons why: conservation is step number 1. That really should be built into any of these alternatives because that's always going to be the best return on our investment and the cheapest. And it expands any of the lifespan of these projects. It also separates the projects across state line. PBAC is a good model of collaborative and cooperative committee across state line, but there's still jurisdictional red tape, and it's a lot easier if we can keep things a little separate. So that was a big play for PBAC's reasoning for that. The other reason is direct use rather than the aquifer recharge or aquifer storage and recovery. There's just some public perception about putting water back into the aquifer rather than just directly using that and having that treated water just go into our pipes as soon as we get it. And again, as you saw with Robin's slide, the lower cost of this alternative, it's all expensive, but at least if we start with those first couple phases and start getting that water, really in the end, we could see all of these alternatives coming to play in the next 50, 100 years, but we have to start somewhere. And the point is that we can, pick and choose some of these different alternatives and the different elements from those alternatives and really start working towards getting an alternate water resource. Because we want to conserve our water and stabilize the aquifer and thrive as a community. So that's our presentation combined. And I think we have some time for Q&A.
Yep, we can open it up for some Q&A. I'm going to read a couple of the questions from both of you speaking, and we'll have folks chime in, and then we might also go around the room if we have a little bit of time. So one of the questions was, Saline, for your presentation. It said, did Palouse experience a water leak or other event that explains the massive jump in consumption?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Palouse is obviously a smaller town compared to Moscow and Pullman. So when you see any sort of increase compared to Moscow and Pullman's usage, it compounds. And so maybe an extra 1 million gallons of water looks like a ton of extra water. So it doesn't look great on the chart. Again, those charts can be deceiving, but Palouse didn't use that much water. It's just a tiny bit more water.
All right, perfect. I have another question for you, Saline. Why isn't data from Colfax included?
So Colfax, I didn't include this in our presentation, but the boundary has changed. We have more research and data on the boundary formation underneath us. It's very complex. If only we could have a magnifying glass to look through bedrocks. But Colfax is actually not in the basin. We thought it was previously, and so we have pulled that data out of our information moving forward.
Yeah, I'm going to plug the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee website. There is actually a report posted on the website. Dr. John Bush put a lot of effort into redefining that boundary, and you can go there if you're really interested and find the specifics as to why we're making those determinations. Okay, I have a question. I think this one's probably for you, Robin. What is passive recharge? And I think that was mentioned on one of the alternatives.
Right, passive recharge is basically just allowing the water to infiltrate on its own. So you might have to get rid of the, some of the surface soil that has lower porosity, lower infiltration capacity to allow the water to naturally infiltrate. And the benefit of that is the soil naturally cleans the water as it gets into the aquifer.
Great. Okay, I see, bear with me for a second. I know there was a good one in here. How frequently are measurements taken in the wells? Are these available in real time?
I think I can
Take a
answer
stab
it.
at that
Robin
one.
can assist. We do have data loggers in those 30 wells. They take hourly readings. No, you can't see them on a cool website somewhere. We gather those every summer to get all of that information and then pull together those hydrographs. Did I answer that question?
I think that helped.
Robin, anything else you want to add?
To add. It's fairly extensive. Okay. This is for you, Robin. How are water rights taken into consideration?
Water rights, when we did our evaluation, we were really looking just for red flags. How many water rights are there? And what we found is that you can't buy all the water rights and have enough water. We would have to apply for new water rights. And so that's an early step. So there's a lot of work that still needs to go into the refinement process to see, is this alternative actually viable? Is there enough supply? So once we determine, yes, there's enough water, once the agencies say they agree, there's still more work to be done on that, but that's when you would start to file for those water rights.
Okay. I see. What increased conservation measures are planned to be implemented? And that's somewhat to be determined too as well. Anything to chime in?
All I can say is we're still trying to figure that out too. The cities are coming together, as well as the universities, the counties, to come up with potentially a regional conservation plan. So it's not just a Moscow plan or a Pullman plan, but really come together as a region and say, these are the conservation measures we want to take. Because it's all one shared resource. It doesn't matter where that state line is, right? So what that looks like, how it looks like, there's still maybe a few more toilets that we can replace, but we've got to do some bigger steps than that.
Yeah.
Celine?
Yes?
I have Sean Coates here, the Pullman Public Works Director. He might want to respond to that.
Great.
Sure, that's a great question, and there's a lot of work to be done on the water conservation side, and as was mentioned earlier, that's the biggest bang for the buck, right? So we want to put a lot of energy into that water conservation piece. So right now our rebate program is pretty strong, but there are some areas that we can improve there, and those that remember last year's Water Summit, one of the main points of that from Amy Vickers' talk was that replacing hardware is actually one of the best ways to save water. So that's a program element that we have going right now. We've heard strong advice from the community to say, we see people watering lawns in the middle of the day during the summertime, and we really don't want to see that. And so right now, Pullman is actively working on taking a look at how we can revise our code to do some watering restrictions, to say, okay, don't water during the peak hours of the day, just water during the nighttime when there's not as much evapotranspiration. A few other program elements, we're working on an advanced metering infrastructure system that allows our customers to monitor their water use absolutely real time on a 15-minute basis, in fact. So that's something that we're pretty excited about, that will give us a lot of data that our customers can work from to say, oh, wow, I might have a leak that I need to fix, or well, I've used a lot more water this month than I thought I had, so I'm going to cut back so I can help save on my water bills. So there are quite a few things in the works there, and there's a lot of ground to be made up there. Even though we've been working on a water conservation program for decades, there's still ground to be made up there. So we're excited about that.
Perfect. Thank you, Sean. And I know Moscow's busy working on efforts as well, and we mentioned some regional collaboration, and so those things are in the works as well. And the universities, there'll be ways to engage, and obviously our different entities will have different approaches. Would you make a mention to our county conservation? We're going to be hopefully amping up some programs in the counties to help promote conservation among residents out there as well.
Yeah, PBAC was just awarded $50,000 from ARPA to do more water conservation outreach within the counties, because while we have a lot of great data for Moscow, Pullman, and the universities pumping, we still have a lot of rural residents with individual wells that just have direct access to the aquifer. So it's not an unlimited supply, so we need to still be doing outreach to the counties and those well users on their water use.
Okay. Any questions out in the audience? Paul, you want to go around? We probably have about 5 minutes, maybe, max.
Just an anecdotal situation in Lathrop County. We're currently going through adjudication on water rights, and the Nez Perce tribe has claimed half of all surface water. And so it's still a big mess, and so I don't know if you included that in your analysis or not. But my main question is, it appears that you've picked the lowest cost alternative, and right now we're pushing $200 million for a new airport facility that is only going to boost consumption. Why not pick one of the higher cost alternatives to help keep pace with that anticipated increase because of the airport?
Okay. Cost was just really one of the factors that we looked at, and cost is certainly really important because unless you have the funds, you can't do it. But it was really looking at that, all those other criteria, and that's how we came up that alternative 5 rose to the surface. But it's something that's good to consider.
Right here.
Yeah, you mentioned pump storage possibilities here. At one time, that was a serious consideration just for the energy that would be coming from that. And is there any possibility the Corps would consider pump storage again, and then Moscow Pullman's water would just be a side benefit, basically, for their project?
Again, something good to consider. We haven't talked with the Corps, so that's a good question.
Other questions out there? Okay. Well, I think we got through most of the questions here. I know we'll be able to record these as well, and there'll be some of the things that we can follow up with on our website. We'll be adding a lot of information and pushing outreach really hard. So thank you, ladies, for your wonderful presentations. I'm going to zip back up here, and we, I think, maybe, are going to open it. Oh, that wasn't what I wanted. I think we're going to open it back up for some more polling, if I have our slides right. I'm going to peek in the back. Yes, okay. Maybe. So get your phones out, have them ready. Don't let me get antsy here. We all know how to get there. Okay. And we only have a few questions on this one, but these are going to stem some from what we just heard about. How does it make you feel to know there are multiple potential alternate sources? And I'll give you all a minute to catch up to speed. Okay, it's comforting. I know it makes me feel better as well. Okay. Just something to consider and think about. Okay, our second question, what's most important to you when selecting a water alternative? Rank the most important as number 1 to less important as number 5. And this is some of those factors that Dr. Nimmer mentioned. I know we're making you think really hard. Okay. So we are seeing a wide variety. I'm going to look at Rusty again because I'm not sure that I have the 5th one under there, but we kind of seem to be all across the board. I'm going to let this simmer for a minute. And is cost the 5th one at the bottom? Okay, sorry, I can't quite see it on my screen. Where is that coming in at? Somebody who can see it. Okay. Okay. Well, that's very informative. Sorry. Nope. Somebody shouldn't give me this here. I'm going to try and go to the next one, which is, do you have a preference if water is sourced directly, which means treated from the creek or river, or used in aquifer storage, which would be treated from the creek or river and put into the aquifer? And Robin mentioned what that was a little bit more. Okay, like either option, maybe the one that gives us the most water, right? The most success. Okay, direct use, aquifer storage. And this is our last question from this round. Do any of these alternative projects interest you? And I would say maybe pick one, so maybe your favorite. And I know we're thinking, because I know our numbers are a little higher, so I'm going to wait. Okay. Well, that feels somewhat good. Alternative 5. Don't have a preference, 26%. And then we have the other alternatives coming in a little lower. Is there anywhere on alternative 4, which I can't see, saline? 8%. Okay. All right. Well, I actually like those results. Thank you all for humoring us. We are about halfway through our event for the evening, so I just want to put a special thanks out again to all of our sponsors. Remember to look at the back of your programs to see all those wonderful folks who helped make this event possible. We're going to do the raffle at the end. I think hopefully you've all registered by now. And there's also the exhibits out in the entryway. I think there's some devices out there if folks are interested in picking up conservation kits, that sort of thing. So don't be shy after our programming, head out that way. And then we're going to move into another presentation. And this is by Dr. Jennifer Adams. Dr. Adams is the Berry Distinguished Professor in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Washington State University. She holds degrees from University of Colorado and master's and doctorate degrees from the University of Washington in Civil and Environmental Engineering. Her work studies the connections between climate, hydrology, land use, and ecological, natural, and agricultural processes. This includes understanding how climate variations and direct human influences interact to alter surface hydrologic processes at watershed, regional, and global scales. An endowed professor, Adams is the recipient of multiple outstanding research faculty awards. Please help me welcome Dr. Jennifer Adams.
Just want to thank all of you for having me here, and for Paul for inviting me, and Julie for recommending my name. All right. Is this? How do I move this forward? That's not it. Okay. Any help here?
So you should be able to push the green button.
The green button. Okay.
If you need a laser, it's this right here. This will take you back.
Great, thank you. So this is a project I've been working on for quite a while now. Every 5 years, we work with the Washington State Department of Ecology, and they're mandated to put together a water supply and demand forecast for the next 20 years for the Columbia Basin, and then some focused analyses on the Columbia River and then the eastern Washington watersheds there. So we've been working on this for quite a few years. There's 4 of these that exist now. The last one was just released actually earlier this year. It's a 2021 forecast, but it got stuck in approvals, and so it just got released this year. And I've been involved myself in 3 of these. So remarkably, I just realized sitting here that I've been working on this project for like 15 years. So this has been quite a process. We improve it each time, and so you can download the report and see what we've worked on. And so what it does is it's helping improve the understanding of where we need to work on water supply development across eastern Washington. So this is a very large team. It involves a lot of people at Washington State University, including Julie Podolsky, who's here, who was a speaker last year. We're also working with Aspect Consulting, University of Utah, and then, of course, we are very in tight partnership with Washington State Department of Ecology. We are looking at quite a few trends related to climate change, population growth, trends in agriculture, and responsive to that, to both of those. And so we're working with some pretty sophisticated integrated computational models. It has hydrology, it has rivers, it has reservoirs and dams, and we can look at the snowpack. So the ways that climate change is impacting not only the hydrology, but the cropping systems. And then we're also looking at some decisions as well related to planting dates and crop mixes being planted. There's also quite a bit of work looking at population growth that Julie led on this project as well. So this is the domain. We have to look at the entire Columbia River Basin because so much of our water supply comes from Canada, and it comes from Idaho and other parts of the region. But this, of course, is a Washington project, so we're focused in on watersheds in Washington. And then ecology calls those the WIRAs, Water Resource Inventory Areas. So anytime I say WIRA, that just means a watershed in eastern Washington. We are just looking at portions of those watersheds that are within Washington. So for example, the Palouse would just be looking at the Washington portion of that, or the Walla Walla. We also look specifically at the Columbia main stem, and then we also have a new study this time that's looking at the aquifers, and I'll show you some of those results that are led by Sasha McClarty in civil engineering here. So there's a lot for this. It's the water supply and demand forecast. It's one of the fewest, at the state scale, there's really no other comprehensive study that's been done. Washington, I think, is pretty much leading in terms of doing this. We look at surface water, groundwater, and then multiple demands out of stream in terms of agricultural and residential, and then in stream in terms of flows for fish and hydropower. I'm not going to talk about all of these. What I'm going to do today is talk specifically about what we're getting from our integrated models. This is the part of it that I led, the surface water, the agricultural demand, and then Julie Podolsky led the residential piece of this. So I'll start there first, and then I'll talk a little bit about the groundwater analysis. We have yet to actually run some groundwater models to do this. We want to do that if we have funding going forward in the next forecast, but right now what we've done is trend analysis, and so you'll see some of the results that we have here are similar to some of the results that have been presented in earlier presentations. So let's start with the integrated modeling. So in terms of supply, what we're seeing going forward, so we did this for 2040, but we also did it for 2070 just to see what it looked into the very long term. For the 2040, what we're seeing at the Columbia Basin scale, this is at Bonneville, is that what we have here is water supply according to water year. And so what's happening is that this whole hydrograph, there's 2 things happening. On the one hand, with precipitation possibly increasing, there's quite a bit of uncertainty around what would happen with precipitation. There could be an overall increase in annual supply, But what's happening is that it's shifting earlier in the year. So that's the more robust shift. And that's because the Columbia River Basin is snowmelt dominant. Most of our runoff comes from snowmelt. So as that's happening with warmer temperatures, there's going to be more rain falling and less snow falling. And so there's less of a storage in the wintertime, and so that water is going to be moving out. So what's happening is this whole hydrograph is getting shifted earlier in the year, so there's more water coming out in the, kind of the winter, early spring, and less water coming out later during the summertime. That's a problem because we need a lot of water in the summer, especially for agriculture and other uses in the summertime. So we're losing, even though the annual increase is occurring, we're actually losing water during one of our most critical periods of time during the summer. Okay, so what we have here is we calculated a shift. This is a center of timing shift. It's about 22 days earlier with the Columbia Basin. We can look at that for a few different watersheds. Here's the Wenatchee. The Wenatchee is interesting. It's one of the most snowmelt dominant watersheds in eastern Washington. So you can see quite a bit of shift there happening in dry years, in average years, and in wet years. And we're also seeing that, again, increase of supply during the cool season and a decrease during the warm season. Here's another watershed, the Palouse. I put this one in there because here we are, the Palouse Basin. And so this is just the Washington part of it. The Washington part is very strongly rain dominant. Maybe only 10-15% of our runoff actually comes from snow. And so what's happening is we don't get this shift in the hydrograph. Instead, it's much more dominated by what's happening with precipitation, and there's a lot of uncertainty around that. So if anything, we could get an increase in surface water supply in the Palouse. But again, there's much uncertainty there. Okay, so let's look at other watersheds in eastern Washington. So we have these are the WIRAs, and they're cut off at state boundaries. As you can see, I'm going to do 3 case studies here. The Wenatchee, that's 45. The Palouse, that's 34, and the Walla Walla is 32. So what we have here on the left is how much of that runoff is generated from snowmelt. And the darker colors, of course, the Wenatchee is very snowmelt dominant. The Walla Walla, maybe 30% from snowmelt. The Palouse, much less. And then on the right, you can see the center of timing shift of supply. It pretty much matches 1-to-1 with how much of the runoff is derived from snowmelt. So we're going to see, again, the largest vulnerabilities in those Cascades watersheds like the Wenatchee, the Yakima, the Methau, and then much less vulnerability as you're going away where there's less of a snowmelt influence in terms of this movement of water away from the summer. Okay, so if you aggregate over the entire eastern Washington, what we're seeing here is that if we look at low supply years, right, there's interannual variability every year, so some years have less supply, some years have more supply. Overall, what we're looking at is related to precipitation, probably more annual supply coming in, but this is mostly true for the wet years. So what that means is that years that are already prone to flooding you'd have more extreme floods happening. So we're looking at about a 4%-ish increase by 2040 in terms of the high supply year. Whereas the low supply year, it's a slight change and it's actually insignificant. So the years that are most critical for water supply, we're not necessarily seeing much of an increase. It's really more the high supply years. So that's one vulnerability there. But again, the bigger part of it is across eastern Washington, which as a whole is snowmelt dominant, we're looking at a huge shift in water supply with a large reduction during the dry season, which is June to October, of about 30% by 2040, and then an increase in the wet season of about 15%. So that is probably our largest vulnerability in terms of climate change on water supply. Let's look at water demand now, looking at just outer stream. I'm not going to get into in-stream water demand changes just because of lack of time, but here we have agricultural demand. If you look at just the climate change impact, it's actually a slight decrease in agricultural demand, which is not intuitive because warmer temperatures would increase your evaporation potential there. But what's happening is there's other things going on with the crops, with reaching their phenological stages faster and reaching maturity faster, which would mean that you would actually need a little bit less water depending on which crop type it is. And there's also some CO2 fertilization. So there's actually a slight decrease just due to climate change. But if you start adding in things like planned acreage that Washington, the Department of Ecology is planning in terms of irrigated extent, that means you're looking at an increase in irrigation demand of about 7%. Then you look at the change in residential water demand, municipal and domestic, and we add that in, and it's about 7.5% increase in water demand that's out of stream. That does not include industrial. So looking just at irrigation demand by each watershed, what we're seeing on the left is the historical irrigation demand in acre feet per year. And you can see that, you know, the areas that are highly irrigated, of course, have the greater demands. What's interesting is to see how that changes into the 2040. And what we're seeing is that the cooler watersheds, especially in the Cascades, have a net increase in irrigation demand, whereas the lower watersheds have actually a bit of a decrease in irrigation demand, again, related to their baseline climate, what type of crop is being planted, things like that. Okay, so there is definitely a mix. So what this means is that, again, those eastern watersheds, those eastern Cascade watersheds, they're vulnerable to water supply shifts, but they're also vulnerable to increases in irrigation demand. So they're particularly vulnerable. And then we look at residential demand. On the left here, this is work that Julie Podowski did with her student. We have 2040 residential demand in acre foot per year, and this is at the county level, and then you can see the different municipalities in there, including, you know, there's Spokane as a large yellow dot. We see Tri-Cities in there, Yakima. And then you can see the change in acre feet per year on the right side, with the largest increases, again, happening in the areas where there's larger localities, right, more population. So this is taking into account population growth here. So what we're seeing here is that the vulnerability is a little bit different. Instead of seeing the high Cascades, right, the eastern Cascades watersheds being vulnerable, now we're seeing vulnerability really in the lowland areas. So those are, again, a different picture of vulnerability. Okay, and then the groundwater work, this is led by Sasha McClarty, who is also in civil engineering here at WSU. She led this piece. Basically, they did trend analysis, very similar to the work that you just saw, using existing monitoring wells from a variety of different agencies. She separated this out by layers, so you can see the different aquifer layers there, the Grand Ronde, the Wanapum, the overburdened Saddle Mountains, and then outside the Columbia Plateau Regional Aquifer System, like up in Spokane area. And so what she did was she then interpolated, she looked at wells for each of those different aquifer layers and then interpolated trends, okay, and was able to forecast vulnerabilities across these different aquifers. And so here's just a kind of showing where the wells are, wells in the Grand Ronde, the Wanapum, the overburden, and how she looked at each of those individually in order to separate this out by aquifer layer. Okay, then she did, in a vulnerability assessment, what she did is she came up with something called available saturated thickness. This is the difference between the spring high water level, right, that straight horizontal blue line up there, which is basically the static water level when there's no pumping at the end of the winter time. So she took that, and then she subtracted off the pump intake depth, and so that became the available saturated thickness. She then looked at the trend historically and then projected that linearly forward up into 2040. And then she determined to see how many years it would take to get to 25% of reduction of the available saturated thickness, or 50% or 75% reduction. And so if it's greater than 25%, that indicates a need to lower your pumps, right, for reliability. Greater than 50% would be a significant reduction in yield. Greater than 75% would be very critical, right, significant investment or discontinued use of that well. And this is the results. I don't have time to get into a lot of this, but this is showing of all the different layers for each region, she picked out the most critical aquifer layer and then mapped out basically the number of years that it takes to get to 25% decline in available drawdown. And so you can see the most critical watersheds, the Palouse is definitely one of them. We have the Okanagan, the Northern Cypress, Odessa, Quincy, the Walla Walla is one of the hot spots as well, so quite a few here. Okay, and then the trend line that she got over the last few years, Palouse very much matches with the rest of the data that we're seeing today, about 0.8 feet per year over the last few years. And so what this means is this is about 60 years to get to 25% of decline in this particular watershed, which is kind of a scary number, right? 60 years. Doesn't seem that far out. Summary of the groundwater. The Grand Ronde and the Wanapum layers are experiencing the most spatially extensive and steepest groundwater declines. The largest declines are not in the Palouse, but in the Odessa sub-area. Also, some localized declines. We have Yakima Basin, Rock Glade, and other areas. A total of 10 sub-areas across the aquifer layers, they have less than 50 years, right, to a projected decline of 25% in available saturated thickness. So that's the highest vulnerability level. Okay, some simple conclusions. What we did was based off of all of these things that we looked at, right? We looked at changes in high supply, increases in high supply, which means more floods, decreasing low supply, more droughts, earlier supply timing, which is related to droughts, earlier demand timing, increases in agricultural demand, curtailment frequency, how many times a water rights is interrupted, changes in summer residential demand, decreasing minimum flows for fish, and then this change in available saturated thickness. We ranked all of these different watersheds, and what we found was that the vulnerability, areas of vulnerability was very different as you go from, right, the eastern Cascades down into the lowlands. So in the cooler areas, we're seeing most vulnerabilities related to change in supply, especially the shift in supply towards earlier in the year, and increased irrigation demands, whereas the warmer watersheds, like in the lowlands, we're seeing increases in residential demand and also declines in trends in groundwater. So what we see here is, again, we have our 3 case studies, the Wenatchee on top being kind of that snowmelt dominant system, the Walla Walla, which is a system that's particularly critical related to its groundwater, and then the Palouse here, which maybe we should rethink how we do those bars, because that seems like a pretty small bar from what we're seeing with the Palouse. But this is looking at all of these different watersheds across eastern Washington. You can find these there. So overall, again, what we're seeing in eastern Washington is water supplies increasing earlier in the spring, decreasing late in the summer. There's more extremes year to year, right? We saw greater increases in the high water years than in the low water years, which were pretty much steady. Declining low flows affecting fish species, other widespread areas of diminishing groundwater supplies, and then many watersheds with increases in out-of-stream demand. So altogether, you bring these things together, what we're going to be seeing is more and more interruption of water rights, right? More drought-like situations. Okay, some products from this study. We have a legislative report. This has all been released earlier this year. This has an executive summary, a main report with a lot of these results, plus so much more. What results by each watershed, the aquifer results. We have a technical report with all the methodological details. We also have a long response to reviewers, a 4-page fact sheet, and a website where you can actually download all of the data for each of the figures that we have. So I think that's it, and just want to thank you again for having me here.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions? We do have maybe a few minutes if there's questions for Dr. Adams. Super interesting stuff and very relevant to what we've been talking about tonight. Well, let's give another big round of applause for Dr. Adams for all the excellent work she presented today. Okay, and we have one more round of polling to take care of. And this one is focused on water conservation polling. So get your phones out, but I know the question was asked about what sort of things we're going to start doing, and the answers to these questions may help us get started on that process. So you know how to get there by now. Which of the following best describes how often you conserve water? It's okay to be honest. Okay, most of the time, some of the time is coming in second place. But I know we can all probably work on it, right? Do you think you could do more to conserve water? Hopefully we all answer yes to this. Yay! Good thing I didn't predict that wrong. Okay. Okay, what prevents you from conserving water? And I'll give you guys a little bit on this one. It says select all that apply. So 55% of us said the design, picking out plants, and the cost to install new landscaping is daunting. And I know I personally agree with that. And hopefully there'll be resources and creative ways to work past that in the future. I do see the cost to me for water as low compared to my uses of the water. Comes in, and then I don't know if conservation efforts are effective. Was actually ranked 30%. And I can't read the lower one. Celine, any? How many? So we do have 26% that say they don't think they are wasting water, and that may be true. We might have some folks that are really conscious about their irrigation and some of those things. Okay, what actions do you take to conserve water? And again, I think you can select all that apply. Oh, thank you, that does. I should have brought my own phone up and joined in the polling. I'm not that good of a multitasker. Okay, change personal water habits, washing hands, shortening showers, and those are all good things for us to do. Low flow fixtures, those can actually be very effective. Leaks are a big contributor to unnecessary water use. Drought tolerant landscaping, 50%. So I think we all saw those charts about how much water we're using on irrigation, so certainly that's a big area to hit. Okay, have you participated in your city's water conservation programs? Okay, no is 41%, so we have some work to do. Yes is 36%. I commend everybody who's capitalized on that so far. And then 21%, no, I'm located in the county. Hopefully there'll be some options available for you folks in the near future. Okay, how many days a week do you water your lawn? And be honest. In the summer, of course, we're talking summer months. Okay. 0 days. I do like to see that. Sometimes it's mentality, right? 2 days, 10%. We have quite a few in the range. I do see 7 days is 10%. So we're kind of across the board on those folks that are irrigating. Okay. If your neighbor was to eliminate their lawn, which option would you most like to see? Please pick one. And this is our last poll question of the night. So make sure to chime in. Okay, 72% say transition it to a planted landscape that requires little to no irrigation. So we're getting smarter, right? It's that wise-scaping. We do have create a front yard garden. Some of the others come in a little bit lower. And then these results actually open us up for our next little segment. We're going to play a video that came out this summer from the New York Times, and it's titled How to Fall Out of Love with Your Lawn.
Bright green flag that tells the world and the neighbors you've achieved the American dream. USA! USA! From the tiniest LA front yard to the vast expanse of the White House lawn. From coast to shining coast, Americans are truly obsessed with turf. Barbecues, baseball, even impromptu musicals, it all happens on the lawn. But there's an ugly truth hiding behind America's glorification of grass. Lawns are damaging our planet, ruining our health, and wasting our time. The obsession has its roots in the manicured lawns of the European aristocracy. The fashion caught on with the elites on both sides of the pond before it was reinvented for the white middle class in suburbia. And now, lawn grass is everywhere. There's more lawn than any other crop in America, even corn. So the problems it causes, and there are many, become magnified. The most egregious one? Water. Americans sprinkle so much water on their lawns every year that they could fill 5 million Olympic swimming pools. And of course, the drier the region, the more water needed to keep your neighbor jealous. Much of the American West is being fried by the worst megadrought in a millennium.
For the first time ever, officials in Southern California are declaring a water shortage emergency.
And lawns are directly competing against farms, our food supply for scarce water. Some parched cities are so desperate, they're now sending out patrols to enforce watering bans with harsh fines. Outside the American West, sure, there is way more water, but there are also more problems. Most American lawn grasses aren't native to America, and they need a cocktail of fertilizers and herbicides to thrive. But herbicides can be really toxic. And millions of pounds of nitrogen fertilizers sprinkled over lawns every year, well, that's a massive source of carbon emissions. And nitrogen runs off into lakes and rivers, turning them into dead zones choked with toxic algae. And when all this lawn treatment is done attacking the planet, guess what it attacks next? You. You have to cut your lawn with, you guessed it, a gas-powered mower. These gas guzzlers churn out 5% of the nation's toxic air pollution, and anyone standing near one is inhaling that good stuff straight into their lungs. In fact, Americans in some cities can spend up to 50 days of their lives looking after lawns. And while that's something some people are into,
I like mowing my lawn.
That's still 50 days they'll never get back. Thanks, lawns. But get this, in spite of all the damning evidence, maintaining a manicured lawn is literally required by law in many municipalities. Punishments for not complying can be harsh. The city of Bloomington, Indiana ruled that grass could be no longer than 8 inches. Resident Alexander Gould sued because he wanted an eco-friendly unmowed meadow instead. The case went to the state appeals court. Gould lost. Basically, the judges told him to suck it up and keep mowing. Lawns have a powerful hold on America. To break it, 2 things have to happen. The first is simple. Local laws need to be more progressive and get real about the climate emergency and encourage, not block, grass-free yards. The second is going to be a hard sell. It's time for all of us to fall out of love with our lawns. Now, a big breakup is easier if there are better prospects out there.
I want to see other people.
In the Nevada desert, a cash rebate scheme paid residents to remove 200 million square feet of grass and plant native vegetation that needs very little water and no mowing. It even looks good enough to make those European aristocrats jealous. Rainy Montgomery County, Maryland is just the kind of wealthy suburb where lawns rule supreme. But the county took a bold step and ended mandatory grass. Then they banned some pesticides, distributed free trees, paid cash incentives, and even made quit-your-lawn guides. Did that turn Montgomery into a scruffy, overgrown dump? Nope. Montgomery's residents transformed their yards into sustainable, low-maintenance meadow paradises. Ditch the lawn, and that could be you.
Pretty interesting stuff. I heard some good chuckles. Let's make sure to share that same video around. Okay, we're going to move on to our keynote address for the night. That's a good lead into it. We are so pleased to be joined by nationally recognized Western water expert and award-winning author Robert Glennon. The recipient of 2 National Science Foundation grants, Glennon serves as an advisor to governments, corporations, think tanks, law firms, and NGOs looking to solve serious challenges around water sustainability and planning. Glennon is a Regents Professor and Morris K. Udall Professor of Law and Public Policy in the Rogers College of Law at the University of Arizona. He received a JD from Boston College Law School and an MA and PhD in American History from Brandeis University. Glennon is a sought-after speaker and analyst, helping reporters and the public understand current water policy and building a sustainable water future. He is the author of Unquenchable: America's Water Crisis and What to Do About It, Water Follies, Groundwater Pumping and the Fate of America's Fresh Waters, and Shopping for Water: How the Market Can Mitigate Water Shortages in the American West. Please help me welcome Robert Glennon.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks to Paul and the team for inviting me, and thanks for coming. In the day and a half that I've been here, I've been very impressed with how engaged the community is. It's great to see an area get out in front of the problem. You're not facing a crisis right now. Dr. Adams's presentation is very sobering, very dense. That's what makes it scary, because there is a future ahead that you really need to take care of, but by golly, you're doing it. Now, my problem is not only do I have to follow this video, right? Yeah, but I am the only thing that's standing between you and the wine. So he's not going to let you drink. Paul isn't until I finish. So I'm still going to take my time. I'm not going to talk about what's happening locally. I'm going to talk about what's happening across the United States. And I'm going to do that in several steps. I'm going to have a quick snapshot about what's happening around the globe. Can everyone hear me? Okay, yeah, okay. Then bring it home to what's happening in the United States. Do a little bit, intrude on Dr. Adams's turf with a little bit about climate change and water. I'm going to talk about demand and supply. You know, bottom down, it really is just that. You know, demand for water and what's your supply. So what are we going to do about it? What are the solutions? And then I'm going to talk about, just briefly about infrastructure challenges, because they are very, very substantial, and a link to COVID-19 and water, and then a few thoughts about the future. So first, the global picture is really very bleak. First, more than 1 billion people across the planet lack access to safe water. Out of the 7.6 billion, more than 1 billion lack access to safe water. 2.5 billion lack access to good sanitation. There are several million people each year that die of waterborne diseases, and most of them are children. This is a very scary picture. The population projections that the UN has put forward, including the most recent ones from 2022, show an increasing number of people in the planet. We're about 7.6 or 7.8 in 2022. We expect to be up to about 10 billion by 2050. You know, looking at that poll here, I would say that that's within the lifetime of everyone in the room. But now that the lights are up and I look around, I'm thinking it's in the lifetime of some of you in the room. I am not one of them. And farmers are going to need more water to grow the same amount of food. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has very clearly had a substantial impact on food supplies, threatening food security across the globe. So that's bleak. And the situation in the United States is a complicated one. I have written these 2 books. I do just want to observe that we're coming into holiday season. They make marvelous presents. So USGS every 5 years comes out with its, don't go there, all right. It comes out with its estimated use of water. The latest one is a little dated, it's 2015. It takes them 3 or 4 years to compile all of the data. But it's quite stunning. Across virtually every user group in this report, water use has gone down. And if you look at the great southwestern cities, Los Angeles, San Diego, Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Tucson, all of those cities are using less water today than they did in the 1980s. Even though every one of those cities has seen its population grow by at least hundreds of thousands of people, and in some cases by millions of people. So there's really quite a bit to celebrate. But there are also some big challenges. The drought situation across the states, you're facing some drought here. The worst is south of us, of course, as we sit here this evening. California's in bad shape, the Colorado across Texas and Oklahoma. And that really compromises supplies. Climate change and water is a very complicated interaction, as we heard from Dr. Adams. If you want the long story about this, the Bible is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's several thousand pages long. Or you could just look at this slide. So it's up to you. You can get a wheelbarrow and carry the IPCC report home, or you can just look at this slide. Because this slide conveys in such a short space what's going on with the climate. And every one of those arrows is pointing in the wrong direction. The news is very somber indeed. Oops, I want to go back and do this one. Okay, now you have to imagine that that's a video. Okay? See the water running? Oh, there we go. Okay, so that's Oroville Dam from 4 years ago in California. They had to evacuate 180,000 people exactly for the reasons that Dr. Adams was talking about. Climate change has meant that the hydrograph has changed. The snowpack comes later and melts earlier. And guess what? Our dams were built on a different hydrograph. Dams across the West were built on an assumption about when the peak flows would occur, and those are just simply different. The drought of recent years has been substantial, and it has caused extraordinary wildfires. It used to be that we would talk about a wildfire season. No. Now it's a wildfire year. And the fires that we're seeing, there are more of them, they're burning hotter, they're larger, they're lasting longer. And they have two really important implications for our water supply. First, you get all of this ash left over. So when you do get a rainstorm, guess what? All that ash gets washed into your lakes and rivers and streams. So that's the first consequence, a water quality problem. The second consequence is a water quantity problem. Because these fires are so hot, they're literally baking the crust of the earth. And when you do get that rain, it's not infiltrating. It's just running off quickly. So forest fires are a component of a very, very different water supply problem. So that's what we're looking at in the West. In the East, the East Coast, it's more hurricanes that they're worried about than forest fires. And this one sentence says a tremendous amount about what we have seen as an increase in the ferocity of storms over the very last few years. I mean, there haven't been all that many Category 5 storms in the last 170 years. But to think that there were 38 since 1900 and 15 in the last 20 years is pretty much extraordinary. And now we all know about what happened, sadly, with Hurricane Ian 2 weeks ago in Florida. I mean, incredible destruction. 150-mile-an-hour winds. It was not a Category 5 storm. It was Category 4. It's taken climate scientists a little while to understand how it is exactly that climate warming causes greater hurricane ferocity. But if you think about it, it's sort of simple. Hurricanes require warm water. The water is warming, and so the fuel is there for greater hurricanes. And in the past, when the uptake of the water would occur, it would uptake cold water from below. But now, one of those arrows on that slide, the column of water is warmer deeper. So when the upflow occurs, it's just getting more fuel rather than less fuel. And so instead of dropping from a Cat 4 or 5 to a Cat 1 or 2, it's bumping up from a Cat 3 to a Cat 4 or 5 before it hits land. And when you combine the ferocity of these storms with sea level rise, you're getting coastal flooding and you're getting groundwater contamination by saltwater intrusion up and down the eastern coast and across the Atlantic. Yeah, there you go. Thought it was bad. I mean, okay, so demand and supply. So what do we got? Well, let's talk about the demand side first. So this is Senator Feinstein on not a good day. This was a bad hair day, definitely a bad hair day, God-given right to be able to water our gardens and lawns. Well, here's what you get when you take her philosophy. This is near Palm Springs in the southern desert. I love this photograph. Damon Winter just nailed it. The right side is the Mojave Desert. The left side is this constructed environment. Every home has a lawn. Many of them have pools. It's all just a world of make-believe. So one of the great Western writers, Ed Abbey, once said, "There's plenty of water in the Mojave Desert." Well, plenty of water in the Mojave Desert, as long as you don't try and establish a city where no city should be. And what is that city? Well, of course, it's the city of Las Vegas. So this is the Bellagio fountain. It's not something that anyone can be neutral on. You either love the fountain or you hate the fountain. It costs $40 million a fountain. The fountain has a footprint of 8 acres. It holds 27 million gallons of water. It has 1,200 heads that shoot water into the desert sky. I mean, you can't evaporate water any faster than this. It's just 110 all over the place. But that water came from a contaminated well that they cleaned up. And we heard earlier about Las Vegas's efforts to get people to take out their lawns. They're paying $3 an acre, $3 a square foot for you to remove their lawns. And they've spent $300 million to that end. There's a story that's not often understood about what Las Vegas is doing to save water. There are other demands for water that I think are, they're pretty narcissistic, pretty indulgent. My favorite is bottled water. I wrote about that in my book, Water Follies. Here we have Jennifer Aniston. I think the message of this slide is that if you drink smart water, you too can be a beautiful actress. Another one of my favorites is Kohler's Power Shower. This has 10 shower heads, each with enough water pressure to take paint off walls. These are very popular in Phoenix, which is why we in Tucson look down our noses at people in Phoenix. And there's other reasons to look down their noses. This is Mesa, a suburb of Phoenix. It's under construction, a surf lagoon. Why should Phoenicians have to drive all the way over to the Pacific? They deserve their own surf wave right in Phoenix, and that's what this is going to give them. Or here's another beauty. the resort in Glendale, another suburb of Phoenix that's expected to be completed in 2023. So there are some indulgent, narcissistic demands for water. But there are other demands for water that are incredibly serious, and they involve things like energy. And virtually all kinds of energy production require a lot of water. I chose to focus on ethanol because I thought it was an interesting problem. Even if you have an ethanol refining plant that recycles its water, it takes 4 gallons of water to produce 1 gallon of ethanol. But first you have to grow the corn. Now that's not too bad if you're from the panhandle of Texas and east, but anywhere west of that to grow corn pretty much requires that you irrigate. And it may take as much as 2,500 gallons of water to produce enough corn to get 1 gallon of ethanol. So now you've got, just staggering numbers of zeros in order to have ethanol be a force in our mixture of fuel for our automobiles. Oh, and by the way, all of that is water that would have been used for animals, right? For feed. That corn has instead been diverted, making the food security problem equally intense. So other demands for water, I think, are more subtle. This is Google's facility on the Columbia River. I thought I'd just drop by and say hello. There's a reason why they don't have a sign on it, and I was not welcome. Imagine, I just turned away at the gate. So this is one of their server farms. So every time you press that search engine on your computer, right, it goes into the cloud, right? No, not right. It goes here. This is inside of that building. Thousands of servers all linked up, all doing that Google search for you. And they all are generating heat. Is anyone who's had an apple sit on their lap for more than 5 minutes? You've got to put a pillow to keep from burning your thighs. So it's all generating heat, and they have to dissipate the heat. And what do they use? They use water, because water is a great coolant, as we know from our automobile radiators. So Google has said, among other things, that we collectively upload to YouTube 100 hours of video every minute. And it all has to be stored here. It's all consuming power. So, that video of your cat that you just posted? It's really, I'm sorry, but it's really only of interest to you. So think again. If you're going to post a video, I want it to be interesting. Okay? So goat yoga, all right. If you get goat yoga, that's going to work. But if it's not goat yoga, I don't want to see it on YouTube, just because you think your cat is cute. My hometown, the National Hockey League starting the season, I think today or yesterday, my hometown Boston Bruins. National Hockey League teams use 300 million gallons of water to run their stadiums. If hockey clubs need that much water, every business needs water. We've fretted about running out of oil. Water lubricates the American economy just as oil does. So a lot of demands for water. Now, what about the supply side? Well, the supply side typically has meant divert more water from a river. Well, you're seeing how hard that is to get rights to divert more water. There aren't a lot of places where you can get a new water right to divert. We have many rivers have been diverted so that they don't even flow anymore. The second thing we do is we build dams. And this is an example of where all the dams are around the country. And the third thing is we drill wells. And we are really good at drilling wells. This is kind of a complicated photo, but I want you to see it in two stages. Because this was an iconic USGS photo where they had this guy in the hat. Only they took it at the top in 1977. This is the Central Valley of California, San Joaquin Valley. So that's how much from 1925 off the screen down to 1977, that's how much the land surface had dropped. And the smart aleck guys and gals at JPL 3 or 4 years ago said, what's happened since? And that's from 77 to 2014 or 15. It's dropped another 25 feet, the surface of the earth from groundwater pumping. As we sit here tonight, there are no restrictions on groundwater pumping in the Central Valley. You can still put a well in and pump. In South Georgia, you need a permit to drill a well if you are going to pump more than 100,000 gallons of water per day. In most American states, you have to use water for a reasonable use. What's a reasonable use? Anything. Well, how much do I get? A reasonable amount. That's not a legal rule, that's just anarchy. So business as usual, more diversions, more wells, and more dams is not going to get the job done. So what are we going to do next? Well, we're facing some real tough times in the Colorado River and in the Southwest. You've seen this or a similar photograph, I expect. This is Lake Mead. It's never been so low since it was first built and filled in the 1930s. Its companion lake upstream, Lake Powell, is equally in dire shape. So what's going on here in the Colorado is several things at once. First is the drought. We're in the middle of a 23-year drought. And no one knows whether this is the 23rd year of a 23-year drought or the 23rd year of a 50-year drought, and much turns on that. Second is climate change, and we've talked about that. And third is that the legal rules literally allow for more water rights than there is water in the river. Now, they didn't intend to do that when they set out in 1922 with the Colorado River Compact. They didn't intend to do that. They thought that the river held about 18 or 20 million acre feet, so they doled out 7.5 million to the upper basin, 7.5 to the lower basin, 1.5 in the 1940s to Mexico. And then the tree ring scientists at the university where I teach, the University of Arizona, discovered in the 60s and 70s, sorry about that, but there's only 14 million acre feet over the last 1,000 years. So you're millions of acre feet in the hole before you start to talk about climate change and before you start to talk about evaporation. The Colorado is really in trouble, and it's happening quickly. That's because, as all of us who live in the West know, the canyons tend to be wide at the top and narrow at the bottom. Think martini glass or the letter V. And in the Colorado, the level of Lake Mead and Lake Powell is getting down to the bottom of the V. So each foot of layer in the lake holds less water. And so it's moving very, very quickly lower. It may get to be dead pool. Who would have ever thought that? Dead pool. When no water flows through Glen Canyon Dam. None. Think of the consequences of that. The Grand Canyon. No more rafting. Hey, there's no water in the Grand Canyon. The right side, the vegetation that's grown up incredible vegetation, more vegetation now than ever in history, because the dam has actually leveled out the flows. In the past, before there were dams, every spring with 200,000 or 300,000 cubic feet per second, anything with a seed was washed downstream. Now there's all this vegetation and incredible bird life, peregrine falcons. That'll be all gone. Food. How many, show of hands, how many people like to eat salad? See, I'm making them do it live, The results would be different if this was in person, A lot more, you wouldn't get, I hate salad. No, yeah, I like salad. So, okay, so between late November and the end of March, all of the salad, more than 90% of the salad comes from Yuma, Arizona, that region. So everyone in the United States has a personal interest in what happens to the Colorado River. Okay, well, let's this is a downer. Do we really have to wait to the end of this to get the wine? Okay, so what are the solutions? All right, well, I'm reminded of the wisdom of Winston Churchill. You can always count on the Americans to do the right thing after they have explored every other option. Well, unfortunately, we're still exploring some of these other options. We haven't quite gotten to the right thing. And these are what I call surreal solutions. So this is a billboard, literally a billboard in the state of Michigan, that tells people what they think those of us in the Southwest are after, which is their water. But I taught at 3 law schools in the Midwest, and whenever I'm back there giving a talk, which is fairly often, I put up the slide, and then I kind of get on them. I say, look, this is so unfair. It's a mean caricature. We have no interest in all of the Great Lakes. And frankly, we would be happy with just one of the smaller ones. I don't have time to explain all the problems with this, but I will say there is one obstacle that this proposal faces, and that's something called the Rocky Mountains. So, surreal. Cloud seeding, also surreal. So you shoot some silver iodide up in the air and you hope it rains. It's a triumph of hope over experience. I mean, even if it rains, you don't know it's because you shot the silver iodide up. It might have rained anyway. The National Research Council, our science court, has concluded in a major study, after 6 decades of experiments, there's no proof that cloud seeding works. But would you trust your water supply to these 2 characters? Yeah, I didn't think you would. Okay. Then there's water witching. Oh, Jesus, you can't make this stuff up. All right, so let's get on. Do you have anything good to say? Are there any real solutions? Yeah, there are. And you've been hearing about it tonight so far. And it's going to start with conservation. That is still the low-hanging fruit. It's water you already have. Use it wisely. Now, we read a whole bunch of neat, like 194 stories about what we can do to save water. I'm going to try to add with a couple. 1, turn off a light. If you want to save water, turn off a light. A single 60-watt incandescent bulb that burns 12 hours a day will, over the course of a year, use as much as 6,300 gallons of water. Just one bulb. So turn off a light, or better yet, swap out all of the remaining incandescent bulbs you have and put in LEDs. They use 1/6 of the energy. So you want to save water, go to LEDs. Second, that kitchen food disposal. If you run that 2 minutes a day, by the end of the month, it's going to use about 150 gallons of water. So those food scraps that you're going to scrape off and not run the water to get off from one of the things, put the food scraps in your compost pile or throw them in the trash. But don't use drinking quality water just to get rid of food scraps. So there are some conservation things that are pretty cool. This one's from the Pacific Northwest. It's from an island off of Seattle, San Juan Island. The guy and gal there took one look around and said, we are on an island and we have a well and there's this ocean around us. So they realized that their well level was going down and salt water was intruding. And so they bought this humongous cistern from the Midwest, doesn't it look like it belongs in the Midwest? And they installed it, and they collect water that hits their roof, and they store it in the cistern, they run it through a reverse osmosis system, and they are off the water grid. Really cool stuff. There's a lot of this going on in the Southwest. Tucson has incentives for it. One of the Tucson Water has a program where I got some money back for having a cistern put in my backyard. Lots of cool things under water harvesting. Not everyone has gotten the message, however. No, not everyone. This is during the drought, and this lady is, this makes lawns look like really efficient uses of water, right? She's washing her driveway. You just want to, idiot! Washing her driveway. So one of the things that the city of Las Vegas has done is a series of public service announcements, and I think maybe this would work locally here. And let me just show you this one. This is a 30-second spot. See what you think of it.
Can I help you? To find your watering schedule, go to changeyourclock.com.
Las Vegas has a different sense of what's appropriate for local. Okay, first is conservation, second is reuse. No, I'm not here to tell you to elbow Vito out of the way, but I am here to tell you, boy, is that an important resource. Again, it's water that you already have, so don't get rid of it. Use it again. This is an example of how much water can be saved. This is the Hyperion treatment plant in Los Angeles. It produces a volume of water equal to the 7th largest river in the entire country. And as we sit here tonight, every drop of that water gets dumped into the Pacific Ocean. 7th largest river in the country. But LA made a choice 3 years ago. They're going to reuse it. And it's not going to be too easy. Because if you think about it, all of our wastewater treatment plants are always at the low point in the basement because it's, quote, wastewater, and we're trying to get rid of it. So gravity to the treatment plant, you treat it as little as you can. If you don't have to treat it at all, even better. Although, hey, let's hear it for the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act today, huh? That put an end to raw sewage being just hither and thither dumped into our rivers, You just can't do that. And more on that in a minute with the infrastructure. But so they're going to recycle all of this. So it's pretty exciting. Desalination. This is a tricky one. We certainly have the capacity, the technological capacity to take the salt out of water. But desal faces 3 real challenges. First, it's expensive. Reverse osmosis membranes are very high tech, they're very delicate, they're prone to fouling, they require frequent replacement. Second, it's really energy intensive because it's all done under very high pressure. So the water energy nexus is accented. And third, what do you do with the salt that's left over? And that is a vexing environmental problem because salt doesn't go away. If you start with 100 units, you get 50 units of potable water and 50 units of really salty water. And how to dispose of that is exceedingly challenging. But if you can if you've got a lot of money and a high-value project, and you can work your way through those 3 hurdles, then desal will be one of the tools in the toolbox. Price. The last poll that you did, or maybe 2 polls back, well, I haven't engaged in conservation because the water's so cheap. That's about it. We're spoiled. We wake up in the morning and we turn on the tap and out comes as much water as we want for less than we pay for cell phone service or for cable television. Water is so cheap that most people have no idea, even when they think they're paying a lot, and I ask them, how much are you paying? Well, I'll get back to you on that. And even when they come back with a number, that's not the cost for water, that's the cost of service. Because all of our utilities, whether it's a municipal water department regulated by the mayor and council, or a private water utility regulated by the State Public Utility Commission, those water suppliers are all getting revenues based on their cost to provide the service. That's what they get back. And we need to do better. We need increasing block rates, seasonally adjusted, and we also need to take care of those in our community who don't have enough water. We need to recognize a human right to water. It's the right thing to do. If the richest country in the history of the world can't do that, it's shame on us. But that's not a lot of water. That's about 1%. And then we can have an adult conversation about how to price the other 99%. I can't emphasize this tool enough. One, it works. The poll showed that. You might have conserved if you had to pay more. I mean, this room full of people who care about water conceded, well, I'm not doing more because the price isn't very high. But as I go around giving talks, I meet inventors and water engineers who have built better water mousetraps. But almost to a person, none of them has a viable business plan because the price of water is too low. Okay, and this is, it's more than just a few people who are struggling, and COVID has made this, ratcheted down on it. I mean, a lot of people hurting out there. So conservation, reuse, desal, price signals, and the 5th of my tools is market forces. So I think of our water supply as a giant milkshake glass. And I think of each demand for water as a straw in the glass. And what the law in many states permits is a limitless number of straws in the glass. So the first thing we have to do is arrest that tragedy of the commons. And so what I'm proposing is if you want to put a new straw into the glass, then you need to persuade someone else to take his or her straw out of the glass. So it's reallocating water. And it will work, and is working. I wrote a report on this for Brookings. It's available on the Brookings website. If you like ebooks, my publisher, Island Press, brought it out as an ebook on Amazon for free, so you can take a look at this report on shopping for water. The opportunities for trading water are really very significant, and I just want to tell you a little story here. The revenue that a farmer that someone gets from an acre-foot of water that's used to produce alfalfa is about $900. If that water is used by those farmers in Yuma to grow the lettuce, they get about $6,000 for that acre-foot of water. But if the Intel Corporation uses it to produce chips, it gets $13 million of water. Tremendous value. And yet here's this crazy story I want to tell you. So Intel decided it needed a second plant, a second fabrication facility, as they call it, in Chandler, Arizona. They already had one, have a big campus in Chandler, and that's a photograph, an aerial photograph of their campus. And on the right side is the second fab facility that they wanted to build. What they did was to spend $50 million and worked with the city of Chandler to come up with a better way to treat water. But now I want you to look literally across the street. This is the western edge of this giant complex by Intel. And what do we have here? We have alfalfa fields. Intel spent $50 million because they couldn't figure out a legal way to buy the alfalfa from the people who were from here to the restroom. You know, I mean, it's crazy how convoluted our laws are in the West that prevents something as simple as that. Intel saying to a farmer, we want to buy some of your water rights so we can create this very important component of the American economy with great paying jobs. It's just maddening. So I want to be clear about this. Most of these transfers are going to involve agriculture. That's because unlike here, where there is no irrigation, mostly it's irrigation. And that's very water consumptive. In fact, farmers consume about 80% of the water in every southwestern state and in a lot of other parts around the country. And yet, a slight reduction in agricultural consumption translates into an enormous percentage for the municipal and industrial sectors, 50%. And there's not a farmer in the West who can look me in the eyes and say, Robert, we can't do 4%. Especially if they get that 4% by having the state, the city's government, pay to modernize their farm infrastructure. I mean, it's just too expensive for many farmers to install subsurface drip irrigation or micro irrigation. But it's a rounding error for the cities. So I've suggested that the cities ought to finance the overhauling of farm infrastructure. That way the farmers continue to grow as much product as before, not more product, that would be self-defeating, but as much product. The cities get the water that's saved. It's a win-win situation. So those are the 5 tools: conservation, reuse, desal, price, and market forces. Got 2 more topics I'd like to finish up with. Infrastructure. We all know it, right? I mean, that's why there was this big infrastructure bill. I mean, you know, we're a first world country with third world infrastructure. And whether it's the dams or bridges or water treatment systems, you name it, we have not put adequate resources into maintaining those systems. And this is a photo of some of the dams that are in danger. It's a real problem. And a related problem is this. There are about 50,000 water providers in the United States. 50, 27, and 13 is 40. 80% serve fewer than 3,000 people. 80% of these providers don't have the economic resources, don't have the monies to undertake even the most basic water testing. The kinds of things that EPA expects them to do, not a chance, not a chance. So we really need to have a significant consolidation across the water industry in the United States and an infusion, of course, of monies. We all know what happened in Flint. It was criminal. Little kids drank water poisoned with lead. And yet, that was also a manifestation of the decline in our infrastructure. 250,000 water main leaks every year in the United States. Flint was an urban situation. Could also have been in African American communities in South Texas. Could have been on the Navajo reservation. Could have been in the Hispanic farm working communities in the Central Valley. All of these places have major water problems, and they don't have the infrastructure to provide water to them. We know the benefits of creating jobs from putting money to work through infrastructure and the like, but we just haven't done it until recently. And one of the reasons is, this is the explanation. So 50 years ago today, we start with the slide on the left, and the federal government was producing between 60 and 70% of all of the water for water and wastewater, especially wastewater. It was the federal government that built the municipal treatment plants. And look what happened over the succeeding 50 years. Here's another graph that shows you the same thing. Federal government spending just a pittance compared to any other major expenditure category in the federal budget. Water is kind of the forgotten element. So there's some change. I mean, the Infrastructure Act that Biden signed a few months ago has a lot of money in it, don't get me wrong. It's got like $100 billion for water and wastewater. But the American Society of Civil Engineers and most other groups say we need $1 trillion, $1.5 trillion. So $100 billion is nice, but it's not going to get the job done. So we're going to have to do some other things. Public-private partnerships are one form of tapping into the capital markets, bringing private monies to bear on this. Thinking outside the box for municipal financing. Instead of 20 or 30-year bonds, why not make them 100-year bonds? Just the same way, in how long do you want the payments on your car to be? 3 years versus 6 years? Okay, it's a lot more money if you make it 6 years, but the monthly hit is a lot less. So if you have a 100-year bond, this enables some states and municipalities to do projects they might not otherwise have been able to do. COVID. Good news. So the great Sherlock Holmes was once asked how he solved the case. And he said, the dog didn't bark. The dog didn't bark when it comes to COVID. No one, to my knowledge, got sick from drinking water laced with COVID. Our treatment systems across the United States took the COVID that was in the water out of the water and delivered us the water. And that's one heck of an accomplishment. One of the things that my university has pioneered in is what's called wastewater epidemiology. And it's been around for a while. It's been a way to measure whether there's polio in the wastewater. But they started really in March of 2020. That was the wrong verb. Definitely the wrong verb, yeah. Started testing the raw water on the way to the treatment plant. Not the water that's been treated, but the raw water on the way. And they found that COVID provided them an early warning signal. But still, that was just a municipal plant serving hundreds of thousands of people. But then they took it one step further, and that's what this slide is about. This was on the University of Arizona campus. So as the students were prepared to come back live, they installed 20 sites around campus, including some dormitories, and they started testing the waste flow out of the dormitories. And one night they got a hit. So the next day they tested all 325 students. 2 tested positive. They segregated them, and no one else in the dormitory got sick. So COVID hasn't gone away, and there will be new iterations of it. And it seems to me that this is an important policy tool for people who care. What I like about this is it's cheap, it's impersonal, it's private. No one has to give their name. It's just like you find out, is COVID present in my water supply? And then from that, you can take steps to correct it. So now the future. Well, Yogi Berra, the old Yankees catcher. I grew up in Boston. The Yankees, I hope, did they win today? Tell me they didn't win today. So I don't even like people who wear pinstripe suits. So I'm not a Yankees fan, but he was a character and a half. So yeah, tough to make predictions, especially about the future. Well, I have some predictions. One, it's going to be a lot more green infrastructure. You're seeing that in Portland and Seattle, major efforts to keep the water that's rainwater out of the treatment system. Really important to prevent combined storm sewer overloads that flow into Puget Sound or other sensitive waterways. We're going to see Silicon Valley meet the Central Valley. Digital agriculture is just really taking off. Farmers have always used computers, but the stuff that is available to farmers these days is just really quite extraordinary. So you're going to see more of that. I see you're going to see more vertical agriculture. I think it's niche, but if you're on the outskirts of an urban area, you might be starting to grow some of your salad greens in a vertical operation. So what else? Well, a century ago, Teddy Roosevelt said that civilized people should be able to do something with the sewage other than by putting it in the drinking water. Of course. No, wait a minute. That's what we do, right? That's what we do today. In 2022, we take drinking quality water and we urinate and defecate in it. If that's not the definition of madness, I don't know what is. So let's have a serious exploration of other ways of dealing with human waste. There are already composting and incinerating toilets. We can do better. We just haven't tried. So my hope going forward, and I know it's a bit of a dream, is that we will figure out a way to get rid of waste, not by using precious drinking quality water. So at the end of the day, I'm optimistic. The challenges are formidable, but the tools that I've outlined are substantial tools, and we can address the crisis and keep it from becoming a catastrophe. And what we need now, what we really need, is the moral courage and the political will to act. I think the wine is available. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay. I think we have a few minutes for questions. Mr. Kimmel over there will walk around. Questions for Robert Glennon.
They can start getting the wine, right? I tried. You get to.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll be hanging around up here, so.
Right here, Robert.
Okay.
So in the conversions, the turf conversions to non-turf,
yeah.
Was there a fee to dispose of the sod in landfills or composting facilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. You could have done that. Yeah, I think they just threw it away. Yeah, I don't know that there was a fee. If there was, sir, I have not read about it. Can anyone else confirm that?
There's a fee. You have to dispose of sod
in
Moscow as solid waste. And you have to take it to the landfill and pay by the ton.
Yeah, I
Same
get
as garbage.
Yeah, I get it. I've not read it. If there is, LA's done the same thing. So it's a good question. I don't know.
I have a question. I might ask, based on what you've learned being here the last couple of days and some of the presentations tonight, where would you recommend that our communities kind of focus their first efforts based on your knowledge and background and understanding?
Yeah, well, I'm reminded of the person who goes to India and he's there for a week and he wants to write a book, but he doesn't. And then he's there for a month and he thinks he'll write an article. And then he's there for a year and he's not going to write anything at all. It's complicated. So I'm not here to preach to you what you should do. I think your approach of putting these proposals on the table, doing substantial public outreach, gathering the opinion and views of the community is spot on. You know, whether you'll end up going with number 5, you know, I don't know. My own guess is you won't, as we talked over at lunch. But that's for your community to give you input on, not for me. So.
Other questions? Okay, let's give one more. I was going to say one more big round of applause for the wonderful presentation tonight. Thank you very much. And it sounds like you'll be available for questions afterwards as well, if anyone wants to come up. Couple quick things before we close for the night. Do notice on your table we have several QR codes. Those will lead you to the city's conservation websites. You can definitely check those out for some more information about what programs are in place now. Certainly reach out to folks about things you want to see in the future, and keep an ear out for PBAC's efforts and all the different entities as we move forward. There are Y-Skate books. I know there was the comment about how do I Y-Skate my yard? It's daunting. There's a lot of great literature already prepared. Those are out front. We've got some water devices as well. And then I just want to thank all the sponsors again. There is, if you open up Slido, this will not be presented up on the screen, but we do want some feedback about what you guys think of tonight's events. We would ask sometime this evening, maybe before you leave so you don't forget, to go back to Slido and answer a couple of questions so we have some feedback about how things went and how we can be better. And I'm going to pass the mic over to Paul Kimmel, one of the founders of the Water Summit, and I'm going to let him draw for the low-flow toilet.
Thanks, Kara. Thank you. Robert, thank you for joining us on the Palouse. It's been a great time to converse with you the past few days. This is really why you're here tonight, a low-flow toilet. You know, it's kind of our gimmick, but it works. Well, maybe it's the wine, maybe it's a little free food, but that's okay. So we're going to draw for this, and I would ask our PBAC Executive Director, Celine, to come and draw that winning number.
Can you read that?
I can. Thank you. Ready? 370646. Have to be present to win. You got it? No? Okay. Just come up. Just stay up here, okay? Three 70630. Okay, so there's about a 200-pound box out there for you. Good. No installation. We don't install. Okay. Thank you. Good. Again, I want to thank, as Kara did, thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you for being a part of this important community conversation. Our Palouse Basin Water Summit board, you know, it's a fun group. We try and stay relevant. We scan the media. We look for people, our water experts across the country like Robert and others. But tell us what you want to hear about as well going forward. So with that, thank you, Kara. Thank you very much. Jeff Elliott from Schweitzer Engineering. We need to give him a round of applause. So true story. What day was that? Last Friday? Celine and I met with Jeff, and it didn't go well. All those moving parts, Slido and everything else, was like, nah, it's not going to work. But she spent the weekend. Jeff made it happen. So with that, thank you. Safe travels home. We will see you next year.